All right, well, welcome again to the 2023 Senior Pastors Conference with Calvary Chapel, Golden Springs. We're here again with a very special guest, Pastor Gary Hamrick from Cornerstone Chapel in Leesburg, Virginia. And Gary, great to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Garid. Good to be with you.
How's things going so far?
Great. Good to be here. Always to have the fellowship and just to see old faces. Not that they're old, but familiar faces that I haven't seen in a while until you come back.
Some look a little bit older.
Some
mine included.
Well, we're all aging. No one's getting younger. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great conference so far,
Yep.
and definitely just wanted to set the stage that the Lord's moving by His Spirit, and He is doing a work in Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
Wanted to introduce our audience to you and hear a little bit about your story, how you came into ministry, how long you've been serving at Cornerstone Chapel.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us a little update on how you got started?
Yeah, started Cornerstone 32 years ago now in a school with 18 people, and we actually were not sent out from another Calvary. We were an independent church plant, but about 3 years into it, I realized, somebody's got to hold my credentials. I've got to have accountability somewhere. And so I had a good friend of mine who pastored a Calvary in the vicinity, who's now on staff with me, actually. He retired from that church, and he gave me the video, Venture in Faith. That was so eye-opening about Calvary Chapel. Actually, when I got saved as a teenager, the guys who discipled me were on the radio. I already had been listening to Chuck Smith and Raul Reese and Greg Laurie and Mike McIntosh for years, and so this was an easy fit for us. When I watched Venture in Faith and knew what Calvary was all about, this is a good fit. So I say to people, we were engrafted into the Calvary vine about 29 years ago, but man, it's just been a great affiliation, just the friendship, the fellowship, guys like you. I mean, it's just been a great relationship.
Yeah. Now, tell us how you got started. Did you start in a home where you had a Bible study, or tell us how the genesis of Cornerstone Chapel?
So there were actually a handful of families that were meeting at this public school. It was a middle school in Leesburg, Virginia, and they were looking for a full-time pastor. And I had been 4 years in pastoral ministry as a youth pastor on staff at a Bible church about 30 miles down the road from where these families had planted this little church. And so there was this one old lady in the congregation. She's since gone on to be with the Lord, and she knew my wife. And she said to my wife, maybe your husband will come and be our first pastor. And so that was relayed to me, and I kept thinking, there's no way I'm going to go out. This school was in the middle of a cornfield way in the country with, again, just like 18 people. And I'm like, I had just gotten married. We had just had our first child. And I'm like, I'm not going to go to this little podunk town with, 18 people. But, it was a God thing. And when God guides, as Chuck always says, God provides. And so we went on faith, so the church started with a nucleus of people. I showed up, started preaching the Bible and worshiping the Lord. Those were the two key factors for the growth of our church. You just teach the Word and worship the Lord. Teach the Word, worship the Lord, and watch what the Lord will do. So over the years, that's what He's done.
Yeah, that's been amazing. So from the school, you went to a strip mall.
Yep, went to a strip mall.
So give me the timeline from the school to the strip mall to where you're at now.
Yeah, so we were 7 years in a school. Then we bought a little strip mall, about 30,000 square feet. You came first to preach there years ago, and we were there for about 19 years, and then we had 32 acres that we bought in the meantime, and we built a brand new building. And in fact, this week will be 7 years in that new building.
Wow.
So yeah,
already. And the Lord's just been blessing you. And He's doing a lot of things. I mean, your area has been in the news a lot. With your governor. With a lot of the moves with our school system.
Right.
And you guys have played an integral part in making sure that a biblical worldview is communicated to your church, so that they can own that for themselves and then impact change. Tell our audience a little bit about some of the challenges that you face as a church, and then just dealing with current events. How have you handled that, and what's been kind of a guiding force for that?
One of the things we encountered is when we went to build our building we're in right now, we were sued by an adjoining landowner who sued the town and sued us to block us building on our property. And a circuit court judge actually agreed, and it's a long, convoluted story about zoning and the town zoning ordinances. But anyway, we had to go all the way to the Virginia Supreme Court to be able to build the building we are in now. We got a unanimous decision there. So we had that. But the more recent thing I think you're referring to, in Loudoun County, it became the epicenter for craziness in the country, where we had a policy that our school board passed that allowed children to identify by whatever pronoun they wanted, whatever gender they wanted. And of course, parents were like outraged by that. And our current governor, Glenn Youngkin, kind of rode that wave of parental, unrest because this policy was being passed and all this gender confusion, all of this stuff. So, we started as a church inviting people to recall the school board members. We got really involved in just trying to engage the people in changing policies and voting your values and like really trying to bring righteousness. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproof to any people. And we just wanted to be about how can we advance righteousness and what can we do to make a difference. And so our folks got really engaged in trying to make a difference in our community.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be the hands and feet and even mouthpiece, for the Lord, and to be involved in practical things. And that's a great way of carrying out your faith.
Yeah.
What were some of the opposition? What was some of the opposition, or some of the maybe strategies or attacks of Satan that came against you, against the church, that maybe you could encourage others that are in the same situation where they're getting a lot of flack for standing for righteousness? What would you say to them?
Yeah, just to encourage folks that, truth by itself is exclusive, and truth can be offensive to people who don't want to accept the truth. So even as we would try to, proclaim truth and teach the truth and just, teach the Bible, and people are going to still call you a hater, they're going to call you bigots, they're going to call you all kind of things. And my encouragement would just be, stay true to God's word, stay true to what you know to be right, and let all the naysayers say all that they want. You just stay true to the mission. And that's the other thing, too, is we can't allow our frustration with the culture to hinder us from the mission. We still have to be salt and light, and we have to share the good news of Jesus. And so just to encourage anybody who's watching or listening that if you're trying to do your best to advance the gospel in every way, not just preaching it, but living it, and people come against you and they want to accuse you of this, accuse you of that, which we received our share of hate mail and threats and all this stuff. Look, just push through it. It's a badge of honor when we are identified with the cause of Christ and people are mocking us for that.
Yeah, you've received a lot of attention, and I hope that those that are watching can go and visit your website. What's the website for your church?
Yeah, it's cornerstonechapel.net. Cornerstone Chapel, .net.
And they can also look you up on YouTube as well, which kind of pivots to my next segment, is you've received a lot of attention in your attempt and your desire to honor the Lord, to be true to His word, and to be active in your faith. You've garnered a lot of attention, good and bad. I mean, some of your latest videos and teachings are in the few millions of views, which is a lot. So you might have a lot of people like, Gary, but there's probably a lot of other people that are like, I can't stand this guy. And what do you do personally, just kind of maybe to pull the curtain back a little bit on your private life with the Lord? How do you handle when people are just so belligerent, just terrible, nasty, saying bad things? Like, how do you deal with those things in your relationship with the Lord that enables you to keep pushing through? Yeah,
that's a great question. I have to always remind myself that there's really an audience of one that I have to please, and it's the Lord. We can either be a God pleaser or a man pleaser. You can't be both. And so if I'm going to please the Lord, I know that there will be people who, take issue with stuff I say. And no matter how well I try to say it, like, wrap it in the love of Jesus, but, again, truth is offensive. So I just have to guard my heart. Somebody once said, discount the high end and the low end of flattery and criticism. So it's like, don't let flattery go to my head, and don't let criticism, hold me back either from doing what God calls me to do. All of us are called to do what God calls us to do. If we know we're pleasing Him, we can entrust all the people who have their different opinions. We can trust them to the Lord. We have to be focused on, is this pleasing Him? If it is, great. If not, then that's what I need to correct, but not because other people are flattering or criticizing.
Right. I think it was Winston Churchill that said, if you have enemies, maybe this is more of a loose paraphrase,
Right.
but the point will get across. If you have enemies, great. It means you've actually stood up for something at some point in your life.
Yeah.
And there's not a better cause than to stand up for the cause of Christ and the gospel going forth. And so, excellent. I mean, you're a phenomenal Bible teacher. The Lord's put you in a very influential place, and it wasn't something that you sought after. The Lord just said, here, I'm entrusting you with this, and you've been stewarding it. And along those lines, and raising up the next generation, let's talk about Cornerstone. Let's talk about the school. So I didn't want to mess up the name, but why don't you introduce the school that you guys just opened?
Cornerstone Christian Academy.
That's right, yes.
Just opened it up August of this year. The ACSI, which is the organization that accredits Christian schools, said that ours was the largest opening day attendance of any Christian school in the country ever.
Why did you open the school?
We opened the school because of the craziness that is happening now. All this, drag queen story hour stuff and pronouns and the sexualization of children and all this stuff. I mean, literally, there's reading material approved by many school boards, not just ours in Loudoun County, that parents would get up and read at a school board meeting, and it would be pornographic. It would be disgusting to hear. And so for that reason, we just felt like instead of complaining, we had the ability to buy it was a private school on 90 acres, not too far from our church. They closed during COVID. We bought it. And then we quickly renovated it, hired teachers, and it's a fully functional. It's K through 8 right now, but we're going to add high school one grade at a time.
As
one
they
grade,
graduate on,
But we had 550 students day one on a K through 8 school, and when I announced it, I had 400 teacher applications for a job the day I announced it. And so, like, the outcry of teachers wanting to leave the school system and parents wanting to protect their kids from the craziness in our school system, that's why we opened Cornerstone Christian Academy.
Yeah, and it's been something I think that's a testimony to the faithfulness of God, His provision, and when there's no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
And if God gives you a vision for something, it might be unprecedented, it might be a little scary.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody that might be watching, maybe they're a pastor or a leader in their church, and they feel like God's calling them to take a step of faith? They're receiving a lot of opposition for those that aren't doing, they're wicked, they're doing what's wrong. What would you say to encourage somebody to maybe take that step of faith if they're a little concerned about, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I feel like God's calling me to do it?
Yeah, if you know that the Lord is calling you to do something, then just trust Him. I mean, the resources will come. God will make a way, and all we need to do is be faithful to the calling, and God will provide, and God will give us the resources we need. I mean, I've been amazed at how He has pulled together the right teachers, the right administration for our school that we just launched, and it's a God thing. You can stand back and say, except for God, this would never have happened. And so it's good to be in a place where you're very unsure, how's this going to work out? Because then when it happens, you know you didn't do it. It was the Lord who did it.
Yeah, God gets all the glory for
exactly.
it. So Gary, on a personal note, when you feel overwhelmed, I think some of our pastors and our teachers that have shared at our conference have kind of given more personal insight, some of the things that they've wrestled with or struggled with, or how they bounced back after they thought, I don't think I can do this anymore. What were some of the things, or what was maybe something that you have had to process, or how do you handle severe attacks of spiritual attacks coming against you? How do you deal with that kind of thing? Because often we can look at guys that we respect and that we honor, that the Lord's given them large ministries, and we think that they're kind of they're not included in the normal everyday kind of struggles of everybody else.
Yeah.
But if you were to just kind of pull back the curtain in your own life, what are some of the things that you feel like maybe the Lord's been showing you, or things that you've really had to kind of wrestle, through?
I hit a wall 7 years into our church ministry where I just questioned my calling. I questioned whether I should quit. And I actually went up to see Joe Foch and drove up to Philly, about 3 hours from where we are in Leesburg, and had lunch with him. He just spent the day with me, just encouraging me, and just really spoke into my life. So One thing I would say is, because all of us go through periods of discouragement, seasons when we're questioning, God and this and that, is have a couple of people that you are at least able to go to and pray with, and have somebody that you trust who can encourage you. Pastors we can be pretty lonely, because it can become isolating, because you can't always have friends within the congregation, because they always kind of treat you as the pastor, and so it's like, who can I just really be an average Joe friend with, and that's hard sometimes. So I find that most of us are lonely in ministry. Most of us are isolated. We don't have like a strong friend group. And so it's important to find one or two guys that we could really go to and just pour our heart out to confidentially and say, this is what I'm struggling with. And spiritual warfare, Garid, I mean, you've experienced it too. I mean, the enemy will attack us in different ways to just try to discourage us, to try to keep us defeated. And it's a constant battle of just praying through it. And if you're married, to be able to, with your wife, to just come together in prayer and just really seek the Lord and press through, because discouragement is a normal part of ministry. Spiritual attack is a normal part of ministry. I suppose if it were all really smooth without any problems, then we would not be as dependent upon the Lord. So all those little things that happen are just a constant reminder of, we got to press into the Lord, and it keeps us in that.
Amen
good
to
place.
that. Well, Gary, you're doing a fantastic job.
Thanks,
from
man.
all of us that kind of watch from a distance from other parts of the country, thank you so much
brother.
for your ministry. Again, this is Garid Beeler. I'm in studio with Pastor Gary Hamrick from Cornerstone Chapel in Leesburg, Virginia. You can go to cornerstonechapel.net if you like to hear more about the ministry that's taking place on the east coast of our country. God bless you, and we will see you later.